Hello and welcome to the Inside Right podcast, episode 12. John Beach, it's our second one of the UK.
Very, very exciting to be here.
Very exciting. We have James Pearce here with us today, journalist, Liverpool fan, football fan. How are you, James Pearce?
I'm very good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the invite along. Are you guys good?
All good, all good. A lot of travelling, but we are
27
here.
hours to get here, but mate, you know what? When you come into Anfield and you're going to two games in 4 days, and life's pretty good. You know,
Life's pretty good.
You can put up with it. You can put up with a lot.
It's worth it.
Yeah,
exactly. Let's get straight into it, James. Where did your love for football start, and what made you a Liverpool fan?
Well, I was born in 1977, so growing up in the early 80s, it was, funny enough, my aunt, even though I grew up 200 miles south of here in a city called Bath in the southwest of England, but my aunt was a Scouser, and she was a football fan, and she bought me, the shirt and the scarf, and so that was kind of where it started. And then, yeah, of course, at that time in like the early to mid 80s, even though it was so far away from Merseyside, everyone in my class at primary school was either Liverpool or Everton, because they were not just the two best teams in England, probably arguably at the time the two best teams in Europe as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was where it kind of snowballed from, and yeah, like most young kids.
I know what you mean. Growing up, I was born in Portsmouth in 5 years before you, and I remember, like I was in Portsmouth, and I didn't come from a football family, but I loved the game, and I remember like it was Saturday afternoon, Jimmy Hill. Remember, match of the day.
Yeah.
And I was trying to explain to Wes, because the kids these days have got access to every game on every channel, whereas we only had that little window of sort of match of the day. And I'd sit down and be besotted with it, and of course every week it was Liverpool.
Yeah.
And then you just, and then as your team chooses you, right? You just
yeah. You're right. It was such a different world back then, because my little boy is 11 and absolutely football obsessed and loves Liverpool, and he can't get his head around the idea that back then you might have been able to watch one or two maybe Liverpool games a month.
And now you can watch the training sessions.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's crazy, right?
It's a whole different world.
You obviously played football. Were you much of a player, James?
Many people would say no. I did have a trial at Southampton when I was about 11, and they had a centre of excellence in Bath, which, funny enough, it was through there that they picked up Gareth Bale, who obviously went on Southampton, Tottenham, from there. So yeah, I've still got the rejection letter in a scrapbook somewhere that tore me to pieces the day it arrived, and lots of tears shed. But yeah, that was kind of what led me on to journalism, really, because I think even though I've always loved playing football, I still play five-a-side 2 or 3 times a week now. But it was, when you have that realization, quite a cruel realization probably when you're 11, 12, 13, that it's not going to happen in terms of being a footballer. It was like, well, what else could I do? Because that was like what I wanted.
Were you a hard-working midfielder, or what was your position back then?
Yeah, it was centre midfield at the time, and then obviously not being short and not really growing much from probably the age of about 12 onwards. I think that coupled with a lack of ability, that probably cost me in the end. But then I'd go to games with my dad, and it would always fascinate me, the fact that there would be people sat in this little kind of box in like the middle of the main stand, and it was like, oh yeah, that's the guy who, when my parents would get the papers delivered the next day, oh, that's the guy that was there writing that at the time. And so that was kind of where it started, really. I thought, well, if you can't play it, then imagine being able to write about it as a job. It just fascinated me that people actually did that as a profession.
Yeah. So what got you interested in journalism? And was it a person that really inspired you to just go, I want to have a fair crack at this?
I wouldn't say there's one particular person. It was more, I loved English at school and used to like read loads, and I used to love, I've got scrapbooks from kind of like 1989, 90, 91, 92 of like, when games were on TV, I'd do my own little match report like in a scrapbook and keep that. And
I do a bit of commentary.
He's laughing because that's exactly what he does.
Sometimes I get them out and show my kids, and they'd be like, "How bad was your handwriting?" And I was like, "Well, it hadn't really improved much in the 35 years since." But yeah, it kind of went from went from there really. And then even from probably at the age of about 13, I started doing work experience at the local newspaper, and it was a world away from Anfield. Our local non-league football team, Bath City, who they're now in like the conference, the National League South, so it's kind of like the kind of sixth tier.
Yeah. Okay.
And back then, I think they were even lower, probably in seventh tier back then. And Bath is very much a rugby city. Rugby union dominates.
Yeah.
So it's when you used to tell people you'd go and watch Bath City, and I was a ball boy for them, and then doing shifts on the local paper. I used to just volunteer to do anything really. Go and do the judo or the karate or the hockey, or basically the jobs that no one else wanted to do.
Gotcha.
Just to try and kind of get a foot in the door.
Interesting. So you started at Exeter University, is that correct?
No, Liverpool University.
Liverpool University.
Yeah.
And how was that?
I loved it. Yeah. I mean, the only reason I came to Liverpool Uni was to be able to go to Anfield regularly.
There you go. Fair enough.
It was.
I want to do the same.
Yeah. Because I've been when Liverpool would play in the south, play at like Villa Park, Southampton away, I'd kind of drag my dad to go to the games. It was like a different dynamic. I know lots of people get taken to games by their dad, and it's almost like a rite of passage. But my dad has always liked his football, but not, he's not like massively passionate about it. But it was kind of me telling, begging him to get tickets for certain games. And then, so we'd go to quite a few like southern based away games. And then it was October 1990, Liverpool against Chelsea. That was like my first game at Anfield. So it was like, I was 12 at the time. So yeah, that was like in terms of the love affair with Liverpool, that was kind of when it went to the next level, really.
And that 1990 team, like, you think back to you're there at Anfield. Who are you watching? Who's?
Oh, I mean, incredible. Like Ian Rush, John Barnes, Steve Nicol, Jan Molby.
Wow.
It was Grobbelaar obviously in goal, and just obviously Liverpool had won the title in the May for the 18th time. And I remember my dad, before we went into the ground, he bought me a scarf from one of the stalls outside, and I remember saying to him on the way home, "Oh, you've bought me the wrong scarf because this one says Liverpool 18 times champions of England on it. This will be out of date come May." And of course, it wasn't out of date for 30 years, which was ridiculous. So, going through school in Bath, like it was always a plan, because back then journalism degrees were really new. So the editor of the local paper had said to me, "Look, I wouldn't do a journalism degree if," he said, "do a degree in something you really you're interested in, and then if you still want to do journalism after that, then you can do like a postgraduate course." So I came to Liverpool and did a degree in history and politics.
Wow.
So this was like 1996. So that was, I always feel that's a bit of an underappreciated period in Liverpool's history, 96 to 99, when I was here, because it was like, obviously you had the very kind of you had the Roy Evans era, where I think people forget now, because we've been blessed with the success we've had under Klopp, that back then, the Roy Evans era, after what had happened under Souness, was actually a breath of fresh air. And that team played some unbelievable football. With you had a young Fowler, obviously Redknapp was there, McManaman absolutely running the show. I mean, I think of all the players I've loved over the years, it feels like he's maybe one of the most underappreciated because of how things ended with leaving on a Bosman. And so they were great days. Yeah, it was. I just remember we'd be in our student house on Smithdown Road in Liverpool, and me and my mate Peter used to always go to the game. But I think back then there used to be like a general sale 18 days before every game. So you'd just be there with the landline, because we didn't have mobile phones. Just redial, and it would be engaged, and you'd redial, and you'd do it hundreds of times before you'd finally get through and manage to get tickets for the next home game. So
wow.
Three years in Liverpool. Liverpool was a really different place then. Now, see you guys coming over now, and it's vibrant, and there's been so much investment, and it's really on. There's a real buzz around it. But Liverpool back then in the mid 90s, there was unemployment was high. There was a lot of deprivation, and no one really stayed around out of my kind of friendship group. Most people just went. There wasn't really the job, so everyone kind of went back where they came from. So that I ended up going back to Bath and working for the local newspaper there for 5 years.
Interesting.
And then obviously came back into, because I think it was it 14 years you were at the Echo?
Yes, 14 years.
So you came back from Bath, or were there a couple of jobs in between?
No, just straight. Yeah, so I worked for the Bath Chronicle for 5 years, like 2000 to 2005, and I always wanted to come back to Liverpool if I could. And obviously,
you must be looking for jobs.
Looking for jobs, and quite often in journalism, and it hasn't changed that much over the years. That it's quite rare for jobs to come up, because sometimes when jobs do come up, they get filled internally, or they've got someone in mind already. So I came up for an interview in like the January of 2005 at the Echo. Felt like it had gone okay, then didn't hear anything for months, and I was like, I must have been that bad.
What month did you start in?
It was so I never started to the June.
So because May was pretty big that year.
Yeah, well, it was. So that was the thing. It was probably about a month before Istanbul that I got a phone call out the blue to say, look, we're really sorry we've taken so long to get back to you. We should have let you know there'd been a recruitment freeze after we'd done the interviews, because there was like a.
They didn't tell you.
No one had told me.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
But they said the recruitment freeze has now been lifted, and we'd like to offer you the job. So yeah, that was a pretty easy decision to make in terms of moving back up here, but it was initially I was just doing, it was a general sports reporter's job and sub editing and page design, because I'd done those things in Bath as well. So again, when I walked into the Echo, the idea of being the Liverpool reporter was a bit of a pipe dream, really, because there were so many other people ahead of me in the pecking order. So I'd say things like, I'll go and do the rugby union this weekend, I'll go to the British Athletics Championships or whatever, just to try and get more experience.
Were you in Istanbul?
It's a very, very painful story, actually. Funny enough, I went to quite a few of the games on the road to Istanbul. And then with the move from Bath to Liverpool, Peter, who I mentioned before that we'd always like go to the games together when we were at uni, and we kept doing that. We'd go to a lot. En route to winning the UEFA Cup in 2001. Me and Pete had done. We did Barcelona away, Roma away. We were in Dortmund for that amazing final against Alaves, and then with moving, I was actually taking quite a big pay cut to go from Bath to Chronicle to the Liverpool Echo, and it was. At the time, it was literally like the day before the final in Istanbul. Peter rang me and said, "I've got you a ticket."
No.
And and I said, "Oh, I can't believe it." I said, "Like, give me." He was like, "But I need to know, like, yes or no, quick."
Because you got to get there, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that was the thing.
It's not down the road.
No, you can't just jump in the car and get from Bath to Istanbul. And so I said, "Give me like 15 minutes," and so I went online, was looking, and obviously because they just bump up all the flights, don't they? And most of the flights had disappeared because obviously Scousers were going en masse. I think that the cheapest flight I could find was... I don't even know if I had time to drive there by this point, because this was like 24 hours before the game.
Wow.
And it was like, I think it was like, would have cost me like 1,500 quid or something to get there. And then obviously everything else. So I was thinking, well, it's $2,000. And I just didn't have $2,000 at the time, and so I actually watched the final against Milan in a bar in Bristol, and it just shows what an emotional roller coaster football can be. Because of course I'm sat at the bar with my mates at half time, thinking, thank God I didn't max out the credit card by doing that, and then come the end of the night, I'd have paid double or treble to be able to say I was there.
Yeah,
so it's the only consolation is it doesn't hurt as much now as it did in 2005 because of the things I've seen since. It kind of cushions it a bit.
Quick story. I got married in March 2004, and my wife comes from an Australian rugby league family. In fact, her father was won the grand final. He was a famous player for St George.
Oh, okay.
So he then became a coach. So he was like a coach in the Winfield Cup back then, the NRL. And she would get dragged as a young girl through all this. She hated rugby league because her whole life was her dad either sitting at home watching videos or during the week or coaching or whatever. And then it was quite funny because the first time I met the father, and the father was, again, not huge in stature. He was a halfback, And I was and soccer's in Australia, at the really time. Only in the last. It was really 2006, I think.
Right.
The World Cup 2006 that sparked some general population interest. But there I am walking in, much taller than him, in 2003, meeting him for the first time. And he goes, "Well, here you play soccer." And I said, he sounds a bit like Ange, you know. And
Yeah.
he goes, who you play soccer, mate? I said, yeah. And he goes, you a puff or what? And that was seriously, that was the
mentality of the time, yeah.
At the time. And then it was quite funny
attitudes
because by the time 2006 came along, I had him out with me watching every single game of that World Cup. And all the attitudes changed. But back to Istanbul. So my wife's asleep. It's 5 o'clock in the morning in Australia. And I'm sitting there and she walks out and I'm just bawling my eyes out, right? And she's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, we were 3-0 down at half time. We don't understand. And Stevie scored, Speezer scored. And she goes, but you didn't cry this much at our wedding. And I said, well, love, our wedding wasn't this important. Like, you don't understand. It's funny, we were sitting down yesterday here talking about those starting lineups.
Yeah, oh, it's great.
We had no right to, we had some class players. We probably had a couple of world-class players if you think about Stevie and Xabi Alonso. But and then we had some good players. But they had, to a man, standout world-class players.
Like 3 or 4 Ballon d'Ors in that starting 11.
Yeah, you're right. When the anniversary comes around, I quite often stick the DVD on, and you're right, there's, not at the start of it, they have obviously the 2 lineups side by side
and you're
on the
looking
graphic,
for weakness,
and it's
you're looking around going, you sort of go, well, Crespo, okay, he might be but then you go,
but
really?
if he's the worst,
yeah, and that's why I think nothing will ever come close to that, and I know, because it was just against all and it was just, if anyone wrote a script of everything that happened that night, you'd have just lobbed it away as something stupid.
Jimmy Traore.
And
Harry Kyogo. I mean, that was obviously
And the dude, to be honest, every time I see the Dudek double save, every time it comes on, I still expect it to go in because it's like because everything tells you the ball has to end up in the back of the net.
Exactly.
Anyway, I didn't want to get cut over this damn ball, but you talked about some. Yeah. Anyway.
There you go. Obviously, you worked at the Liverpool Echo. You did a lot of press conferences in that time, I can imagine. Which manager did you enjoy dealing with the most?
They were really different. So I started as the Echo's Liverpool reporter in February 2011. So it was just about a month after Kenny Dalglish had come back. So before that, I'd had some dealings with Rafa Benitez and then obviously Roy Hodgson, who didn't hang around long.
He was there and gone.
Yes, yeah. So I cringed in quite a few Hodgson press conferences when he was coming out with some of the nonsense that he did. So it was, it feels like a bad dream. Feels like a bad dream now that he ever managed Liverpool.
He did sign Paul Chelsea, didn't he?
Yes, Christian Poulsen and it was a bit surreal for me because Kenny Dalglish had been one of my absolute heroes. Yeah, growing up as a kid, posters on the wall, and then suddenly my boss has taken me down to Melwood to meet him, and Kenny's given me his phone number, and
wow.
So
I don't think I would have dealt with that. I just really don't, because I'm the same as you. Like the first poster on my wall ever was King Kenny.
Yeah, King Kenny,
and I wasn't quite young enough for Keegan, but it was Kenny, and then to meet him. And just must have been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it was because it was not only Kenny the man, not only Kenny the player, but also Kenny the man in terms of everything he'd done for Liverpool as a club and as a city.
Pretty down to earth bloke, is he?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very dry, funny. It was interesting because it was like, obviously absolute hero, and you only had to in terms of where the club was in the doldrums when he arrived, it was like someone had flicked a switch in terms of all that negativity being lifted. Yep. And obviously FSG had only bought the club a few months before, and they very much intended Kenny to just kind of be a bit of a stopgap until they brought in a younger manager. But of course, he did so well that they had no option because the clamour was so much on the Kop to give him the job permanently. And from a journalist perspective, Kenny was actually quite hard to deal with because, as anyone knows, when his media persona has always been say as little as possible. Don't give away anything. So it used to be, it was, you used to ring him every morning because back then at the Echo, you used to have a morning, you'd have a night before deadline and then there'd be a later edition on the day where you could update it. So my boss would always say, well, always, give him a ring when he's on the way to the training ground at 8:30 in the morning, try and get something new, even if it's like an injury update or whatever. But Kenny would be an absolute master of, you might have half an hour on the phone with him And then I could see my boss out the corner of my eye kind of thinking,
and he hadn't said anything.
He hadn't said a word. Hadn't said a word about anything. And you go back through your notes and it'd be like, oh my God, I haven't got absolutely anything here. Like, I'm having to break the news to my boss that,
what have you got?
He wouldn't, this is what he said on that. This is what he said on that. This is what he, it was, and then the dynamic was very, very different when Brendan Rodgers came in because, for a start, Rodgers was kind of, coming in as an outsider, coming from Swansea, biggest job of his life. I think the thing that people forget about Brendan Rodgers as well at the time is he was still so young. I think he was 39 years of age and that is a daunting prospect walking into Liverpool. We just finished. It has been a really strange season because Liverpool had finished 8th. I think it was lowest finish for 18 years. Yet had won the League Cup, nearly won the FA Cup. Agonising defeat to Chelsea in that final. But I found Rodgers great to deal with. I mean, it helped me as a journalist, the fact that, I think he needed kind of allies, if you like. So he kind of, as the local newspaper, he kind of welcomed me in and said, right, I'm willing to give you, 40 minutes of my time every Thursday or something. So quite often I'd go down every Thursday, I'd see him in his office and it would be like 20 minutes on the record, 20 minutes off the record. And obviously, as people know, off the record can be quite often is more valuable than on it because you can ask him anything, he'd tell you, but it was like, don't quote me, you put this in your own words. So, that went on for quite a long time. It was only really in 14, 15 when, the wheels obviously really came off the Rodgers reign after Suarez had left that, and he started to get hurt by a lot of the criticism and he then said to me, look, I'm not doing this anymore. You're too critical and that's where it can be really difficult as a journalist.
That's going to be hard part of your job, right?
Yeah, because especially at the time, you're getting absolute pelters on social media for not being harsh enough.
Yeah, so you're a fan, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and you can't pull the wool over people's eyes, can you? Like, 14, 15 was dreadful when you think of that.
You can't,
FA Cup semi-final defeat to Villa.
Right? That's what you got to report on.
Yeah. So it was, like anything in being a journalist covering football, it's so much easier to do your job when things are going well.
Yeah.
Because people pick up the phone, they want to talk. Yeah. Oh, it's positive, and then when it goes the other side, that's when you start hitting answer phones. People don't reply. People then take offense. They demand to know, well, who's told you that? Who's briefing against me and all this, and it can become, very, very difficult trying to handle contacts and relationships. But I've still got a lot of time for Brendan Rodgers, still keep in contact now. And then, of course, when Klopp came in, it was very different again because he was already this huge global figure out on the back of his work at Dortmund. And I always remember the first Christmas after Klopp came in, and when I was still at the Echo then, and so after a main press conference, the managers would do what we call like the breakout section, which is just for the newspapers. And it used to always be in a side room at Melwood. Yeah. And it would just be like no cameras, 10 minutes or something every week after the main press conference, just so the newspapers had fresh quotes. Mm-hmm. And one of the lads kind of suggested to Klopp, it was probably like early December. We usually have this tradition of like, we'll take the manager out for like something to eat just before Christmas. And we'd done it all the way through Rodgers' reign, Kenny as well. They'd probably done it before that, before I was around. And Klopp just kind of laughed and kind of went, "Why would I want to do that?"
Really?
And it was, you had to like admire it in a way because he was just like, "Well, why would I? Why would I want it?" It's because it was just I think he was very different. I think his actually was, well, no, there's going to be a bit of distance here. Like, and even to this day, what we now kind of 8 years after Klopp arrived, I don't know a single UK journalist that's got his phone number or in a position to contact him directly.
He's like,
he's kept that distance, and it's.
Does that make it easier though to then ask some of the more difficult questions?
Yeah, I'd say in a way. Yeah, it probably does, and also it kind of makes it. I think it would be more difficult if a chosen couple had it, and then that put you at a distinct disadvantage. It's almost like a level playing field for everyone. The fact that this is the boundaries. So, but no, I mean, I remember being there for Klopp's first press conference, which was just an absolute masterclass in terms of using the media to to kind of set the narrative, to change the mood around a club and amongst the fan base.
The vision, the
it was all
future.
the heavy bit of football.
Yeah, and and the great thing about it was you came away thinking it just seemed so natural as well. You know, doubters to believers, and it was I mean, I was outside the Hope Street Hotel in town actually when the people carrier the day before that he was in after being picked up from the airport kind of swung around the corner and he went into Hope Street and signed that initial 3-year contract, and there was like hundreds of fans outside celebrating like Liverpool had just scored, and it was, and you were thinking like I don't ever remember a managerial appointment ever creating that level of fervour and excitement.
Yeah.
And I remember going back to the office and kind of like saying to people like, how can this fella possibly live up to expectations? Because when you're being placed already up there, you know, you think there's only one way to go, but the biggest compliment you could pay Klopp is that not only has he's met those expectations, he's actually surpassed them with his body of work.
It was wobbly early on, wasn't he? With, you know, like sometimes he'd carry on the sideline a bit and people were not used to that level of passion and stuff.
But there was always that.
And
there was that one against Palace, wasn't there? Where I remember, I think we were losing by, was it 2-1? I think like 5 minutes to go, and he turned around and there was like dozens of fans streaming towards the exits, and he was like, "What are you doing?"
Where you
like,
going?
and I like that about him, the fact he wasn't shy of like, you know, basically bollocking fans in terms of going, no, you don't get it. We're in this together. Like I think the quote was, you know, he said like, "We decide when it's over." Like, why are you leaving? Yeah. Like, and it was, and that's why, you know, he got a lot of stick, didn't he, for like the hand holding in front of the cop against West Brom to salvage a point, and everyone was like, "Oh, they're celebrating a point," and it was like, then they're not. People missed the point with that. It wasn't celebrating a point against West Brom. It was Klopp saying, "This is what we can do if we all just stay in it together to the end."
Yeah,
and then
you'll never walk alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, under Klopp, everything. Since his first press conference, the way he dished out his vision for the club, it was done in a very Liverpool way as well, which I think helped. When it comes to transfers, how do you get the inside word out to the public, and how does that work? What's the procedure?
Like, you know, from the outside in, right? Like, there's certain journalists, and you saw from one of them, seems they obviously hear things. Because you pick up the paper and every day someone's moving somewhere, right? Yeah. And I'm sure that 99% of it's lies or, you know, made up to just, you know, to sell papers, whatever. But like, as it relates to like how do you start to hear about the real things that are going on?
Yeah, there's not really one particular place. It's a whole host of different places, and sometimes it could be an agent, sometimes it could be a current player, sometimes it could be an ex-player. Sometimes it's someone in the recruitment department at Liverpool or at another club. I always just, you know, I've got to be honest, it's an element of the job I don't particularly enjoy. Yep. It's like, the best day of the year for me is when the summer transfer window is shut, because it's like, at least there's like a little bit of respite before the January one comes along, and January never tends to be quite as crazy. But yeah, it's always a case of, I mean, first of all, obviously there's so many rumours, and I think over the course of my time covering Liverpool, it's become increasingly easy for those rumours to gather pace to the point where lots of people just believe it to be true. Because of social media, things just get retweeted and repeated and embellished and everything else. And then obviously as well, there's so many hundreds and hundreds of websites that just, you know, it's clickbait nonsense that just rely purely on like, you know, feeding this obsession with transfers. So yeah, a lot of time is spent kind of weeding through those rumours really. And some of the rumours are so outlandish in terms of either the identity of the so-called target or the amount of money, you know, Mbappe or something, like, that's the kind of thing I don't need to check out, because I know Liverpool's, you know, you roughly know what they've got to spend in a window. And so if that's, you know, that's an outrageous figure, it's like, well, we can definitely count that out. Yeah. But then, you just go through a process each time of trying to contact people you trust.
Do they sometimes leak it to you? Like, because I mean, Liverpool have traditionally been very close shop and not wanting to spare. That, you know, if you think about, you know, there's been a lot that have surprised us, the Zabozlais and you know, most people are going, never heard of this guy really, in real terms beforehand. But do they ever come to you and say, we want you to put this out there?
Sometimes, yeah. But it tends to be, sometimes it's different people might give you some information. But obviously also, you kind of know as a journalist, when someone gives you some information, it's because they want it out there.
Yeah.
But then you've got to ask yourself, why do they want it out there?
Yeah.
And that's an issue you have when sometimes you're taking information from agents, because you kind of ask, well, what's their motivation for this? Because quite often, I've had agents give me information that then I've been told is wrong, not published it, and then they'll ring me saying, where's the story? And I'm like, well, I'm not doing the story because I don't believe it's true.
That might help with their renegotiations.
And they want it because it obviously, you link your client with Liverpool, and I've seen it time and time again where the same player keeps on getting linked with Liverpool, and I think there was one with Nicolas Pepe, wasn't there, going back? It was a few years. I know you look at obviously where his career's at now, but before he went to Arsenal, and it was Liverpool got so annoyed that Michael Edwards actually contacted his club because they became aware that it was actually his current club in France that were briefing journalists that Liverpool are in for him because they were trying to create a market. So it can be difficult to weed out what's true from what's not. It's just there's no kind of foolproof plan to it, really. I mean, I always just think, that although there's a thirst to be first with the news, I've always thought give me second and being accurate than first and wrong anytime, because you could get 9 out of 10 transfer stories right, but it's the one you get wrong that people will just repeatedly remind you of. So
And obviously you moved on from the Echo, and I'm interested in this part of next stage of your career, or moving roles there, going to the Athletic, owned by the New York Times, sort of like I was going to say the birth, one of the first sort of subscription. People weren't used to paying for quality journalism, right? And they've recruited a tremendous base of global journalists to write for them. And obviously, when you were at Liverpool Echo, you had a certain kind of community that would have known you, and now you've got your stuff's all over news feeds all over the world. Has it given you more of a global voice? You think as a journalist, are you hearing more from around the world?
I think so. Although I did notice in the last years at the Echo that as the shift at the Echo went much more from print to online, you noticed that even comments on the end of stories were from all parts of the world, and obviously doing the pre-season tours that I've done to Australia and the Far East and the States. You realise, people kind of are aware of your work and who you are, because I think the other thing with the Echo is they were one of the first to kind of really embrace the multimedia side of it. So kind of quite often, if someone was reading a story, a video with my mug on it would pop up in the middle of it. So it was people would kind of get to know who you were. But it was a very different job going to the Athletic, because it just came out of the blue. It was a few weeks before the Champions League final in 2019. Got a phone call to say, would I be willing to go down to London to have a meeting with them? And I kind of knew of the Athletic, but I didn't really know. I'm not a massive American sports fan at the time. That was what they did, the major American sports. And then, went down, met the owners, and they explained that they wanted to expand into covering Premier League football, and they were going to recruit kind of people from, and they're primarily looking at kind of beat writers on local newspapers around the UK. And the more they explained it to me, it almost felt like it was too good to be true, because they said, what we want is the more in-depth stuff. We want, and that is where in journalism in general, it kind of moved away from that, because we kept getting told at the Echo, it's got to be short and, and everything's got to, be 300 or 400 words. It's got to have a hook on it for SEO purposes. And you got to draw people in.
I love the longer form.
So
and
I remember going to meetings at the Echo where people said, "Oh, no one will ever read more than 300 words on their phone or something," and now it just seems absolutely laughable. Yeah, but exactly. That was kind of the way it was going, and so to suddenly be told, "Well, we'd like you to come and work for us, and we want you to do more long form stuff," and rather than do 5 or 6 articles a day, which was what I was having to do at the Echo, they were like, "We want 2 or 3 a week." But of course, the challenge is that it's got to be stuff that is not available anywhere else, because it's a subscription model. Yeah. So it has to be worth paying for it. Yeah. So it was I remember lots of people said to me in the months after, kind of stuff "Oh, it must be easier," and I was like, "Well, it's not really easier. It's just different, because it's still challenging because you've got to try and come up with different stuff. But it was just
for me, it's a different level and quality. I subscribe, and
Thanks.
and it's just a different the insight. And as you say, you've got to find it. It's just for someone who's loves the game and a bit of a student of the game, you get that next level of information and quality of content coming through.
Yeah.
I think that's what they've really nailed.
Yeah, and I think also I think when the Athletic started off covering the Premier League, there was almost like a suspicion of like, well, what does this kind of mean for everyone else or something, and what are you doing? And it's like, but I actually think it's good for journalism in general to show that people are willing to pay for quality content
100%.
because. And obviously now the Times have made their paywall work. The Telegraph have got a paywall as well. And, I think it's actually the watch journalism should have gone down the road.
If it's quality
of,
content, you'll pay for it, right?
Yeah,
Like
100%.
because otherwise it becomes a bit of a race to the bottom. And that, I've seen that, with the way that, with companies that just prioritize web hits, it inevitably standards take a hit, because if that is all your motivation is, then that isn't quality journalism.
Yeah, there you go. As an experienced journalist, do you have any advice for myself?
I think that I get lots of kind of journalism students like contacting me, and I mentor a few of them. And I always say to them, you've just got to do everything you possibly can to try and stand out from the rest, because it is competitive, and it's not the kind of thing, I don't think it's not worth trying to do if you're half-hearted about it and 100%. You think, I might like to do this, but I'm not really too sure. If you think everything's going to fall into your lap, because it won't. It's hard, but the jobs are there. Yeah. Like the job, and in fact, these days there's so many, compared to when I was kind of trying to get a foot in the door. There's so many more opportunities to write and to be published now than there ever was back then. I always say to people, like, just think how you can set yourself apart in terms of producing a body of work where if you're going to go in to meet someone in terms of with a job opportunity that might be coming up, what makes you stand apart?
How do you stand out from the pack?
Yeah. And even when you're writing stories, and if whether it's a blog or for a website or something, just a different way of doing things and thinking about, well, just because everyone's writing about that, maybe I should write about this, or just interesting topics and subjects that maybe aren't getting the attention they deserve elsewhere. And I think the other big thing that I always say to people now is get out and see people and meet people and like build contacts, because I think, and I'm guilty of this probably as much as anyone these days. It's so easy to just I'll send someone a WhatsApp message or whatever, or organize a Zoom or whatever. And still, I think nothing beats actually being sat in front of someone.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I think you do too.
We're here. It's
100%. Especially because the whole thing with building contacts is building trust. And you can only do that, people, like, I get people like, well, how do you get contact? I haven't got any contacts. And it's like, well, there's not like a switch that you can flick and go, there's 10 contacts or something.
It's exactly the same business.
It's exactly.
You just got to get your head down, hard work, be really passionate about it. And
give it everything.
And then try and be better than everybody else.
Exactly. Try and stand out. All right, well, let's do a couple of comparisons. I think I'll do one, you do one.
All right.
For James. All right. Prime Suarez or Prime Torres?
Do you know what? I think I would have to go Prime Suarez.
Okay.
Yeah, although I think maybe Torres' legacy is obviously tarnished a bit because of the way things ended with demanding the move and going to Chelsea. I think shouldn't overlook just how incredible he was after that move from Atletico Madrid. I mean, I always think of that goal against Blackburn where he just hooked it into that far corner, and there were even on his debut, I think was it the Anfield debut against Chelsea, wasn't it, where he just shrugged off the defender.
It was just exhilarating.
That burst of speed before the kind of the hamstring injuries kicked in and hampered him a bit, and then obviously lost his way. But I think for me, Suarez is on a different level. I think Suarez has done things on a football pitch for Liverpool that I've not seen anyone come close either before or since, and as Salah, it has to be mentioned in the same breath as the greatest that have ever pulled on a Liverpool shirt when you look at what he's done over such a sustained period. But I think I think for wow moments, that there were periods under Suarez, especially 13, 14, where he was unplayable. Where you look at, I saw it yesterday actually. I think it was Lucas Leiva had it on one of his social media accounts. The header from like the edge of the box, and it's like, how'd you score with a header from the edge of the box?
I mean, I reckon whenever they went down to play Norwich, everyone just would have gone. Do you remember? He always used to score 4 goals.
Scored 4 or 3 goals.
Yeah. I remember like being sat at Carrow Road in the press box and when he scored from the halfway line, like Norwich fans around me just like stood up and applauded him. And of course there was another side to Suarez that the controversies that dogged him, and he, on the pitch he was an absolute lunatic.
Right?
But it's
when you get that level of talent, if you think through over the years, you never quite get that level of genius without something.
Yeah, and I remember Brendan Rodgers telling me a story about how he said in terms of like mindset, he'd never met anyone like him, because he said there were times when he would come in the building the day after a game and his legs would be covered in bruises, he'd be limping. He said you'd be thinking, well, we've got a game in 2 days, like he's got no chance. And they'd say to him, well, Louis, just have a swim, get a massage and get yourself home. And Suarez was like, no, I'm training.
Yeah, you joking?
And he said he'd be out there full pelt. And he said like something, you just couldn't rein him in, because that was him, and that was the way he played. And that's why there is the sadness attached to 13, 14 for a lot of reasons, not least because of the cruel hand of fate with Steven Gerrard. But yes, I mean that is Suarez deserved to be a title winner that season. And I think just because of the moments. I mean, even I remember being at the Stadium of Light when he scored from that impossible angle as well. And you just, I just think in terms of moments that you just think, he used to play like 1-2s just off defenders' shins just for the hell of it. It's just like, this guy is on a different planet.
You mentioned the pre-season tour before to Australia. Were you at the MCG?
I was, that was
when they had the 100,000.
That
was one of your first ever Liverpool games, and Suarez didn't play because he was trying to get the transfer at the time
to Arsenal, wasn't it?
That was the big disappointment. I mean, there was nothing disappointing about the game, but that was disappointing. I never got to see Suarez play.
He was sulking at the time, wasn't he? Because I remember Rodgers had to banish him to train on his own. I always remember I can't remember what the name of the hotel was in Melbourne, but being called with some other journalists to like a meeting with a few Anfield officials that night. They actually it was about the fact that Arsenal had put in this bid for 40 million and £1. And I think now that kind of gets airbrushed a little bit, didn't it? The fact that he was trying to join Arsenal at the time.
It was one of the greatest nights for Australia. Like, you never walk alone bounding out at the MCG. Like, you must have thought it was a bit weird being over the other side of the earth and 100,000 people show up to watch a football game in a country that's not traditionally a football country. It was. I'd been fortunate enough to be at the MCG before I went to watch Essendon Carlton there. Oh yeah,
really?
Back in, I was backpacking in like 2000. That would have been. It was just slightly surreal to be there to end You Never Walk Alone.
Yeah, you were on my shoulders that night, mate.
I remember.
But no, Prime Barnes or Prime Beardsley?
Oh, again, that is a tricky one.
We're not making them easy for you, James.
No. I think I would have to go Prime Barnes. I think because he was one of my all-time favourites.
It was net left foot.
Yeah. And in fact, he scored that day. I went to Anfield for the first time in 1990. Liverpool 2, Chelsea 0. He scored that day. He was just a majestic footballer, wasn't he? And then in terms of the longevity, I think as well. In terms of then he became this kind of like controlling centre midfielder when obviously he didn't have the legs to fly past defenders anymore. So. I've been again. One of the perks of the job is you kind of get to know these guys as well, and he's a great guy, Barnesy. So I'd have him well and truly in like probably firmly ensconced in like the top 5 or 6 ever to have pulled on a Liverpool shirt.
Ooh.
Wow, Virgil van Dijk or Jamie Carragher?
That may well be the toughest of the lot. Are we talking? If you just had to have one in your team, or in terms of contribution
in their
primes,
you've got to pick one.
I think that is hard. I think I would have to go Van Dijk, just because in terms of outfield players, he has to be the most transformative signing in the Premier League era for Liverpool.
Yeah.
In terms of where they were at before he came in, and then where he took them to with, even in that first season when he came in halfway through to take them to Kiev in the way he did, and then to win the Champions League, win the Club World Cup, then win the Premier League. And but that with the caveat that, what an incredible, one club man Jamie Carragher was, and we talked about Istanbul earlier on, how heroic he was that night in terms of, one of the abiding images of him being all cramped up and barely able to move. And, he's such a great guy, Jamie Carragher. So much time for him in terms of someone who gave me so much help. Like when I joined the Echo, he went out of his way to kind of, he really cared about that bond with his local newspaper that he does so much. I know so much of what he does just goes under the radar because he doesn't want it. He's given so much back to this.
He's not the sort of guy that wants
this city. Yeah. So, incredibly humble and down to earth. And also, around 2005, 2007, maybe 2008, there probably wasn't a better centre half in Europe than him. When you think of it was, and it was, he always had this. I know he's talked about it where he felt, he always had to prove himself. There was always, being the local lad that people were doubting him and, who's going to come in and who's going to potentially take his place. But that just seemed to spur him on to the next level.
Yeah, there you go. Sturridge or Peter Crouch?
I think I'd go Sturridge just because I think one of the, when you think back of my time covering the club in terms of disappointments, was it felt that with Sturridge, was someone who was so incredibly talented. There was a bit of potential unfulfilled there in terms of not being able to kick on after 13, 14. And I remember it was interesting at the time because that was pretty much the only season where he stayed fit for the whole year.
Full time,
And I remember him and Suarez they weren't pally, they didn't get on particularly, but it was almost like that almost spurred him on, the fact that Suarez was doing so well. It was I'll show you that I can be just as important.
Magic
kind
too.
of, and it was, he was, and you see him now, he started doing some media work in this country for Sky Sports, and I think he speaks really well about the game, and he's fun and passionate, and it was, I felt really sorry for him because obviously when someone gets injuries as well, then it inevitably leads to talk about how much do they want it, and are they mental resilience or that, which is it's always so harsh when you don't know how someone's feeling, and when you have injuries, it must make you doubt your body and what you're capable of pushing yourself through. So although Crouchy had some great moments along the way, and I think the great thing about Peter Crouch is I think it's almost unheard of for someone to have played for so many clubs and be loved at every single one of them.
Yeah, he's just got that personality.
Says a lot about him as a guy. But I would have to be Sturridge.
There you go.
Mascherano or McAllister?
I think at the minute I'd have to go Mascherano just because I think it's too early in McAllister's Liverpool. I think he's going to be a brilliant signing for Liverpool. McAllister, I thought it made perfect sense, him being the priority signing of the summer, and it was a real bargain, 35 million quid for him. And you look at some of the fees.
We've got to ask the question though. He's playing in the six right now. Do you see that changing? Do you think he's a stopgap there until they sign someone in January?
Surely.
What do you think's going on?
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? At the moment, it's the one kind of nagging concern that I've got about this team is, whether that will cost Liverpool when they come up against Man City and maybe even United or Arsenal in terms of, because I think McAllister as the number 6 is absolutely fine against lesser opposition. I just think there's been times when he's, you can see it doesn't completely come naturally to him. Yes, he played deeper at times for Brighton, but that was when he had Caicedo for company alongside him. So personally, I hope that Endo grows in stature and there's some positive signs of that. And we see McAllister freed up to play a little bit further forward. If that doesn't happen, then I think they might need to look again in terms of bringing someone else in, because I just don't see McAllister as a natural 6.
No, I agree.
Well, this guy from what's his name? The kid they're looking at from Brazil,
Andre.
they must have pretty big raps on him.
Yeah, they certainly inquired about him back in the summer. Obviously when they were kind of, I think that was after about the second bid was rejected for
They were
Lavia.
in the middle of a title chase.
They were. Yeah, the Copa Libertadores was going on at the time, so they were like, no chance till January. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether that's revisited.
Yeah, Robertson or John Arnorisa?
Oh, Andy Robertson, 100%. Yeah. I think in terms of what he's given Liverpool from it's amazing rise when you listen to him talk about his days playing amateur football virtually for Queen's Park in Scotland and answering the phones at Hampden Park to for the hospitality ticket sales and to be relegated with Hull City to then come to Liverpool, and of course his first 3 or 4 months at the club were really difficult. He barely got a look in. Alberto Moreno was still the first choice left back.
That's unbelievable now. When you think about it. Yeah.
But then you look at where his career has gone from there to
8
here.
million,
So
right? 8 million.
Yeah, £8 million.
Liverpool.
Yeah, that's
the last one of these is left with me. Ricky Lambert or Andy Carroll.
If you had to pick one.
You got to pick one.
Wow. Well, oh my word, that is.
You got to choose
it's
one.
Not an embarrassment of riches, is it? Do you know what? I would probably.
Sorry to draw that one on you, but
I would probably have to go Andy Carroll just because I felt sorry for him, and I felt sorry for him during his time at Liverpool because it was a ridiculous. Where Ricky Lambert was clearly like he was brought in as a squad player, and and it was it was a bit of a bizarre decision when they were making a real hash of replacing Suarez, and obviously they end up panicking and signing Balotelli at the back end of the window. It was like with Andy Carroll, I've got genuine sympathy for him. The fact that he was made the most expensive British footballer ever, and he played I think it was 41. Premier League games. He'd scored, just over a dozen goals or something. Was he 22 years of age? Was just kind of getting to grips with stardom at his boyhood club Newcastle. That certainly weren't the Newcastle they are of today. So yeah, just impossible expectation levels and pressure on him. And then also he was bought for I think when Liverpool bought Suarez, Kamoli saw him as more of a number 10 and Carroll would be like the number 9, but then it became clear actually Suarez is much more of a number 9, and then of course the style of the team wasn't really equipped to play into Carroll's strength, so he would speak to players who played in that team and Carroll would be like just wall it up to me, and it was like well no that's not the
what was it that FA Cup final at Wembley against Chelsea, and when he got thrown on I was like it was actually I thought we were actually might have. He came close a couple of times in the last 10 minutes of that game, because of that lob it up, and he was that sort of an option, wasn't he?
Yeah. And he
wasn't. Yeah.
He'll always have that late winner against Everton in the FA Cup semi. I think for that reason, he's got to get the nod.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, a couple of quick fire questions for you, and then it's game time.
Okay.
Best ever import. It's a tough one.
That is a tough one.
Suarez.
It would have to be Suarez. Yeah, with an honourable mention honourable mention for Van Dijk and Alisson as well, because let's not overlook Alisson and what Liverpool have achieved. Because the upgrade from Karius to him. Wow.
Yeah.
That's the outhouse, the penthouse right there. Right. Yeah.
Best player you wish went to Liverpool.
Oh, best player I wish had gone to Liverpool. I mean. You see pictures of a young Kevin De Bruyne, don't you, in a Liverpool shirt, and you think, what if? Yeah, what if? Yeah, he would have. I love De Bruyne as a player, and he would have. There's been a fair few kind of near misses over the years. I remember doing an article a few years back on the ones that had come close and it hadn't gone through, but. Aguero was another one that I know before he went to Man City, Liverpool were seriously looking at, and Phil Thompson, who was assistant manager in Houllier, will tell you about trips to go and see Cristiano Ronaldo when he was a kid, and suddenly the price going up, and before they knew it, United had done the deal. So there's a few what ifs there.
Yeah, best bargain buy. Joel Matip. free.
Yeah, I mean, Matip. If you're looking at free transfer wise, you'd have to throw Matip and Milner into the mix in terms of what they've given Liverpool over a prolonged period. In terms of like small fees, I think we go back to Andy Robertson, 8 million quid from Hull.
That's pocket change, isn't it?
Yeah. And that was why Liverpool, Edwards and Klopp between them were able to scale such heights and win all the biggest prizes, because the recruitment was just, almost unheard of to have so many hits and so few misses.
Yeah. Best South American player.
But not outside of Suarez.
Outside of Suarez,
outside of Suarez.
Yeah. That is difficult, isn't it? I mean, I did absolutely love Mascherano as a player. I just wish he'd stayed around longer, because especially when you think of where he was at. I mean, he couldn't even get a game ahead of like Hayden Mullins at like West Ham at the time, and like Pardew just didn't fancy him at all, and
he was in that weird contract situation, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was like third-party ownership, so they essentially had to buy him off individuals rather than a club, and it was very murky. And then there was that sadness attached, obviously, nearly winning the league in 08-09 and then losing Alonso 2009 and then Mascherano 2010 as the club kind of like almost went completely and utterly off the rails with Hicks and Gillette.
Yeah. Top 4 Liverpool players of all time, like a Mount Rushmore, top 4?
Right, I think this is really, really hard, isn't it? I think for me personally, I know the debate rumbles on about Gerrard and Dalglish. I think because I never really watched Kenny week in, week out in his prime, I think I would put Steven Gerrard at the top.
Yep.
In terms of, because I feel really blessed to have watched his career right from the start to the end. And I think because he didn't have the luxury that Kenny had of being surrounded by absolute quality in every department. Gerrard carried that team for years. And also, I think not just the longevity, but like, the big game contributions and the loyalty, the fact that he could have left, dozens of times to inflate his medal collection and his bank balance and decided not to. So
he almost went to Chelsea at some stage.
Yeah. I mean, everyone tried to tempt him away at some point. Gerrard 1, Dalglish 2. Do you know what? I'd probably say Salah 3.
Wow.
I think that's
big
fair.
call.
I think it's
Just
fair.
I think
it's fair.
I think there's almost, I don't feel like Salah gets the wider praise that he deserves, and
It'll take time, I think.
His career's not done yet.
Yeah. But like when you look at his, as we sit here now, he's closing on 200 goals for Liverpool, and you look at the names he's gone past, and the rate at which he's done it as well for someone who's not an out and out, striker.
And maybe because he came good late in his career, not late, but not. It wasn't.
He was
early,
a late bloomer.
Yeah, he had a few setbacks, didn't he? As well, he was at Chelsea, and didn't work out.
Roma, and it was sort of like
Fiorentina, he had a year there, didn't he? And so you'd think
it wasn't until he came to Liverpool that he really hit the straps.
Yeah. And if you ever want to have a laugh, look at like the replies to like the Sky Sports tweet, and Liverpool did the deal to sign Salah, because everyone was like, what a waste of money, what, as if he's a Premier League flop, and then then it was obviously. Well, he scored 44 goals in his first season. It's like he's a one-season wonder, and it's like he's the worst one-season wonder ever, because he's done it.
The most consistent player.
He's done it every year since. So, so what am I allowed 4? So I've got one more to go.
One more. Yeah.
So Gerrard 1, Kenny 2, Salah 3.
Rush.
Suarez.
I mean, it was. Do you know what? I would probably put Suarez. That's harsh on Rush, but yeah, just because of the wow factor.
And Suarez
and
also did it with not a great team around him. Whereas Ian, he's one of the greatest goal scorers of all time.
Yeah.
But he had some fair players
behind him.
Ian Rush didn't have to play with Victor Moses, did he? So.
No. I feel the same way about some of those United guys, the strikers that have been held up in lights over the years, mate. If I had balls from Beckham coming from the right and Scholes from behind and Giggs from the left, you probably, you would have got a few yourself, know.
All right, it's time. It's competition time.
Right.
John versus James.
I'm not sure this is a fair.
You guys both got the same questions.
I've got
a
dreadful memory. This This could be
He
embarrassing.
won't be being
first to
kind to
say
me,
it.
I tell you.
It's first to say it. However, if it's one of those questions where it's like an exact number, it will be the closest.
Okay,
All right.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
What nationality is Brentford striker Yvonne Wizza?
Wizzer is he Zambian?
You're out, James. It's up to you.
Gambian.
He's from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
We were both close.
What number? This could be quick. Does Jarrell Kwanzaa wear?
48.
No, you're out.
It was on last night.
That was Scanlon, wasn't it, last night?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
The short version of
Kwanzaa.
him.
Is it 52?
It's 78.
Oh,
Guys. Now you got. It's out of 3
Right.
now because we've all got incorrect answers. Okay, this will have a point because whoever's closest. How many Premier League goals
Oh.
does Harry Kane have?
I feel like I'm going to let James answer this first. Well, let's live.
I know.
How many seasons? It's 2, 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a number in man.
Second all-time top scorer in the Premier League. Alan Shearer's first with 260.
I'm going to go 215.
215.
Now, I could take 216 here, James, but I'm not. I'm going to say 231.
231 and 215.
Yeah.
James gets the points. It's 213.
Oh,
213. Oh,
Yeah, 2 goals off.
take
Maybe
that.
if you didn't go to Bayern. First game, Klopp managed for Liverpool. What was the score and who was it against?
0-0, Tottenham away.
High five.
there you go.
Killed it. Well, you're out.
I'm
You're
out. I'm done. What was the last question?
I'm going to call you Sheffield.
Oh, come on.
What age is James Ward-Prowse?
28.
Correct.
Oh.
3-0.
I just got the floor. To be
it's like-
fair, he
it's
does.
like Liverpool
to
United.
be fair, James does do it for a living. You know what I mean? People pay a lot of money to read this stuff. You know? Yeah.
Just to wrap up, James, one more question.
Yeah.
Your number one all-time Liverpool Football Club moment.
Oh. Can I have 2?
Sure, of course you can.
So one would be undoubtedly the moment if it wasn't a bit bittersweet. So I was one of the few that was there when Jordan Henderson lifted the Premier League trophy in 2020, because of course it was
COVID
behind closed
situation,
doors and there was
Yeah.
only probably 300 or 400 people inside the stadium. But I don't think that can be my ultimate moment because it was so bittersweet, because you know that over those 30 years, you know, you go through in your head all the different scenarios. You know, imagine what it's going to be like and what Anfield's going to be like when Liverpool finally win the league.
Yeah.
And then to be there, and it was like, this isn't how it should be.
Yeah.
You know, a global pandemic and, you know, all the seats with blacked out sheets on it to hide the fact that they're empty. And so that would have been it. And like, it's kind of quirky in a way to be able to say I was there. But in terms of the moment, it would be Origi's goal in Madrid that killed
Agreed.
off Tottenham in the Champions League final, because I knew that was my last game ever covering Liverpool for the Echo.
Wow.
And especially on the back of having not been in Istanbul, and I'd been in Athens, I'd been in Kiev, you know, I'd been in Basel for the defeat in the Europa League final as well. So it was like, yeah, that was incredible to be there. And of course, you know, I was at Barcelona for the semi-final fight back, which in its, you know, would live, you know, for me is the greatest night I've ever had at Anfield.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that Liverpool actually went on and to see Liverpool lift the European Cup that night, that was the pinnacle for me.
There you go. Thank you so much for coming on to
problem.
Inside
Been a
Right
pleasure.
today, episode 12.
Cheers, guys.
We've got a gift for you. First of all, we have an Australian delicacy.
Oh, thanks very
Tim
much.
Tams, have that
Oh,
with tea or coffee.
beautiful.
And a Inside Right UK Tour shirt.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
there you go. Thank you very much, James, for coming on.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, guys.